The transmission began with static. For a few seconds, there was nothing but snow on the screen, a gentle hiss of background noise swallowed by deep space. Then a faint voice broke through, distant and trembling. Not panicked, not angry, just tired. "This is Kestrel Outpost Colony 3X7 Emergency Protocol. If anyone receives this, we're still here. But not for long." Behind the voice was the sound of cracking walls and low rumbles, distant impacts drawing closer. The image steadied, showing a man hunched over a control console. Pale, covered in dust. His name tag read, Marshal Rowan. One of the last defense officers left on the planet. He looked up. "We've lost the outer rings. The enemy breached the final shield wall an hour ago. Civilian evacuation failed. Shuttles never launched. Engines burned out. Everyone's in the shelters now. But we all know they won't last." He paused. His eyes didn't look at the camera. They drifted off to something behind it. Something we couldn't see. Something that had likely taken everything from him already. "We sent out calls for help a week ago. Council channels, civilian relays, even the old war-era satellites. No response. I guess we knew no one was coming. We just didn't want to believe it." He looked back at the camera then. "So this is for the record. For whoever digs this out of the ash one day. We didn't run. We didn't surrender. We stayed." He reached down, adjusting something off screen, and the camera view changed. Now it showed the planet's sky, streaked with black trails from falling debris and distant fires. A deep, unbroken red horizon. No sign of resistance, no defense platforms left. "They're coming fast now. We can see them from the towers. There's no one left to stop them, and maybe that's what hurts the most. Not the dying, not the end. It's that we called for help, and no one answered." Another pause. His voice cracked for the first time. "We thought someone would come, maybe a council ship, maybe a privateer with a heart, maybe even a stranger. We thought someone would care enough to try." He reached forward slowly, setting his hand on the console, steadying himself. "If this is the last thing we ever send, let it be known. We're here. We fought. We waited. And we hoped." The image cut out for a second. Just static, flickering. Then the screen returned, this time with a single frame. It showed a crowded shelter. Families, children, quiet, calm, no screaming. Just people sitting close, holding on to each other, waiting. And a voice, barely a whisper, came through the channel one last time. "Goodbye." The transmission ended. No response. No alert from any defense force. No inbound rescue. The council flagged the message, filed it, and left it unread by most. Another colony lost. Another outpost too far, too small, too inconvenient to save. The stars spun on. Ships passed. Trade resumed, and Kestrel Outpost vanished from conversation. But not from space. The enemy still approached, sweeping across its skies like a storm made of steel. And in that dark, lonely corner of the galaxy, no one expected what happened next. Because as the enemy closed in for the kill, preparing to erase the last trace of human life from the planet, the sky cracked open and something ancient fell through. Not diplomats, not pleas, not promises. Warships. The broadcast from Kestrel Outpost echoed across space like a whisper in a hurricane. Some heard it. Most ignored it. It reached council satellites, private relays, merchant channels, and military arrays. It bounced from sector to sector, getting weaker each time, caught in bureaucratic filters and flagged as non-critical by automated systems. A few planetary governments noticed. One or two even read the transcript. But no action followed. Kestrel was a frontier colony, far from the core systems, too small to matter, too close to the borders of enemy space, a place no one wanted to spend ships or resources defending, a place people could afford to forget. The council met in session days later. They acknowledged the attack. They regretted the loss. They passed a resolution, a formal condemnation of hostile expansion near protected sectors. It was signed, archived, Forgotten. No rescue fleet, no retaliation, no answers. Because that's how the galaxy worked now. Safe behind treaties and neutral zones, most had grown comfortable with turning away. Danger, real danger, had become something theoretical. A problem for lesser systems. The big powers protected trade routes. They maintained peace on paper, and everything else was someone else's concern. But deep in the dark, beyond the civilized maps and shining stations, there were those who didn't forget. Not because they were watching, but because they'd been waiting for a reason, waiting for a call, waiting for the right kind of silence. In the far reaches of dead space, a ship drifted, no name, no registration, just a hull older than most species' governments, scarred, black, still. Inside, something flickered, not an alarm, not a siren, a signal. The final words of Marshal Rowan played back in perfect clarity. We thought someone would come. Then silence. The ship's systems stirred. Old tech. Ancient code. Subroutines written in languages no longer taught. It didn't need orders. It didn't wait for permission. It simply responded. Across an invisible network, pulses traveled. From ship to ship, from hangar to vault, from relay to relay. One by one, lights came on, reactors spun up, thrusters hummed to life, and warships began to move. Ships that hadn't seen open space in over a century. Ships not made for patrol or escort. Ships with hulls built for gravity collapse. Armor thick enough to punch through moons. Engines designed to rip open hyperspace, not slip quietly into it. Not council ships, not pirates, not mercenaries. Earth's warships. The ones everyone thought were gone. Humanity had disappeared generations ago. After the last Great War, Earth closed its borders. Cut the lines. Vanished from every network and folded space corridor. No one knew if they had survived or if they had turned inward and died in isolation. Most believed the latter. It was easier to believe. But they were wrong. Humanity hadn't died. It had waited. And, now, with Kestrel's final whisper echoing through space, something ancient had shifted. The last line of old Earth defense systems, buried, locked, and left in the dark, had heard the call, not because it had been programmed to care, but because it remembered, because someone had written one line of code into every ship before they were hidden away. A line that never deactivated. If they call for help, and no one comes, then go. Now hyperspace corridors bent and flexed as silent engines roared back to life. One by one, warships entered pre-launch sequences. They didn't broadcast, they didn't blink lights, they simply turned toward the stars. Toward Kestrel. Toward the place everyone else had abandoned. And from the depths of space an old fleet began to rise again, because someone had finally called, and no one else had answered. They were not supposed to exist. The warships moving now through forgotten stretches of dark space were ghosts from a time the galaxy no longer spoke of. Not officially, not in schools, not even in the Council's archives. The stories had become rumors, then legends, then dismissed entirely. Earth built a hidden fleet, they used to say. A final line of defense in case the stars ever turned on them. Some laughed, some feared, but most forgot. Because Earth had vanished. And things that vanish are easy to erase. But the stories had been true. And the Ghost Fleet, as the rumors had named it, was never truly dead. It had simply gone quiet. The last time these ships had flown, Earth was surrounded. Its allies had pulled away. Treaties failed. Borders collapsed. And in that moment, Earth's leaders had made a choice. Not to fight, to disappear. They shut down every satellite, buried every beacon. They sealed the orbital rings and folded space, one last time. And then they built. They built in silence, in places where scanners couldn't reach, inside asteroids under oceans in the shells of moons long dismissed as dead. And what they built was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Ships with no crew, Vessels powered by core memories, not fuel alone, capable of waiting, of sleeping, of waking on their own. They weren't made to patrol borders or enforce politics. They were made to answer one question. If someone called for help, and no one came, what would Earth do? Now, after nearly a century of silence, the question had finally been asked, and Earth's answer was on the move. The first ship, designation Argentum, Vexon emerged from hyperspace like a blade sliding through velvet. There were no sounds, no shockwaves, just presence. It was a ship the size of a city, matte black with no visible insignia. Its hull shimmered faintly as it exited folded space, its silhouette reflecting nothing. Behind it, 2 more arrived, then 5, then 10. They didn't fly in formation. They drifted like memory, scattered but purposeful, and each ship, though ancient, moved with precision, with awareness, as if they knew where they were going, as if they'd been watching the stars all this time. And, in a way they had, each warship carried archives, not just tactical data or navigation logs, but history. Records of Earth's last days. Audio, video, the sound of abandoned colonies, the silence of unanswered signals. They remembered everything. And now they were heading toward the latest addition to those records, Kestrel Outpost. Not to investigate, not to report, to respond. These weren't ships waiting for orders. They were the orders, and still the galaxy hadn't noticed. The Council's attention was elsewhere. Their fleets were tied up in border patrols, peacekeeping, and economic enforcement. They saw no alerts, no warnings, because the Ghost Fleet didn't announce itself. It didn't seek approval. It moved like shadow under stars, untracked, undisturbed, not until it wanted to be seen, and it didn't want to be seen. Yet, as Argentum Vex entered the outer edge of the Kestrel system, its AI activated a small subroutine. Not a weapon, a recording. The voice of Marshal Rohan played once, softly, through the ship's internal systems. We thought someone would come. The ship didn't respond. It just accelerated. One final order pulsed through the fleet's neural link. Prepare for exposure, because they knew what was coming. Soon the enemy would see them. And when that happened, there would be no more hiding, no more forgetting. Earth hadn't sent diplomats. It hadn't sent emissaries. It had sent warships. Old shadows, wrapped in new fire. And the galaxy was about to remember what it meant when the stars themselves shook from Earth's return. The first fleet went quiet without a sound. 6 warships positioned at the edge of Sector 18K, orbiting a supply hub near the Kestrel region. Standard patrol, routine scan routes, not one distress signal, not 1 second of warning. Then nothing. Gone. Though, Council logged it as a comms failure. A glitch in relay satellites. They dispatched a scout ship. It never returned. Next, a border defense station, fully automated, AI-controlled, monitored hourly, stopped transmitting. No explosions, no sabotage alerts. Just silence. What came next were whispers, fragments of intercepted transmissions. Panicked voice. They're not responding. Station's gone. The station's just... Then static. A trader's private channel, cut short mid-sentence. Something moved past us. Didn't register. Big. Then silence. And slowly, steadily, across the map. Red zones appeared. Not because of combat. Because of nothing. No energy readings, no movement. Just entire chunks of space going quiet. The enemy forces, confident, organized, well-armed, began pulling back. Whatever was out there, they hadn't seen it. Not clearly, but they felt it. An unease crept into their ranks. Fleets started doubling their recon drones. Patrol groups refused to separate. Ships that once pushed deep into neutral space now hovered closer to home. And then, finally someone saw it. Not a person. A probe. An old survey drone caught the footage just before it was erased from the galactic data stream. A handful of frames. Grainy. distant, but unmistakable. A ship, massive, silent, dropping out of hyperspace like it owned the stars around it. No flare, no engine bloom, no signal beacon, just gravity folding around a dark, sleek vessel that drifted into view like it had always been there. Then another and another and another. They didn't move toward anything. Didn't attack, they just watched until the enemy ships turned toward them, and in that moment, they struck. The footage blurred. The probe caught only flashes, shapes moving too fast to track, a bloom of fire, a scattering of wreckage, and then once again stillness. No wreckage remained, no life signs, just cold, empty space. The Council's military division tried to suppress the report, but they couldn't stop what came next. A single transmission leaked to public networks. Just audio. 15 seconds of a panicked officer breathing heavily, shouting into a failing transmitter. "We don't know what they are. Ships just appeared. They didn't fire missiles. They moved straight through us. We didn't even see them coming. They're not talking. They're not even angry. They're just here." Static. Then one final line, whispered like a prayer. "It's Earth. Earth came back." That was the last they heard from the scout flotilla. And just like that, the fear returned. Not fear of death, fear of memory, because the older species, the ones who had lived through Earth's withdrawal from the galaxy, knew exactly what this meant. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't war. It was presence. Earth was showing itself again, not with words, not with banners, not with declarations, but with silence and warships, the kind of ships no one had seen in over 100 years, the kind that moved with certainty, with history, with purpose. Council forces scrambled. Emergency summits were called. Defense grids were reactivated in regions that hadn't seen conflict in generations. But deep down, in every meeting room and command center, the same question echoed. Why now? Why return? And more importantly, where were they going next? Kestrel was quiet, not by choice, by circumstance. The final shelter doors had closed 2 days ago. What remained of the population, technicians, medics, families, were huddled underground, sealed beneath layers of scorched stone and fractured steel. They had food, water, power, but they knew what was coming. Above them, the enemy had settled into orbit. Dozens of ships, big ones, cruisers, troop carriers, support destroyers. It wasn't a fast invasion, it was slow, measured, the kind of certainty that comes when there's no one left to fight back. They weren't in a hurry. Kestrel was a colony. No one would defend, and the enemy knew it. Inside the shelters, no one spoke about rescue anymore. That hope had died the moment the comms went dead. They had seen the sky filled with hostile ships. They had watched their last satellites fall like meteors trailing fire. What was left was acceptance and waiting. Then the ground shook. At first, it felt like another orbital bombardment, a tremor rolling through the stone. Lights flickered. A few braced for collapse, but nothing followed. No impact, no explosion, just stillness. Then a low hum, deep, resonant, unnatural. It rattled the air itself. Sensors sparked. Consoles lit up with errors. One child covered her ears and said the sky was crying. And above, beyond the clouds and the dead satellites, the sky tore open. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a rip in space as seen in textbooks. It was a bending, a warping of light. The stars stretched, then folded inward, as if space had blinked, and through it came fire. Not flame, but engines. Blue, steady and endless. One by one they dropped out of hyperspace, not sleek like modern ships, not chrome, not elegant. These were hulking, black-armored giants, worn by time, not weakened by it. Ships that looked like they had survived 100 wars, and were built for 100 more. No insignias, no flags, but across every screen in the enemy fleet, a single name flashed in old Terran script, Argentum Vex, then another. Cold Dawn, Resolve, Red Echo. Dozens, each more massive than the last. Earth's warships had arrived, and they didn't pause to explain. They didn't open communication. They moved. The lead ship, Argentum Vex, tilted toward the enemy fleet and vanished, reappearing a second later inside their formation, moving too fast, too precise, too impossibly. A shockwave followed. One enemy cruiser bent in half. Another detonated before sensors registered a hit. Then came the others. From the far side of the system, Red Echo emerged, unleashing a silent beam that cut clean through a support vessel without a flash. No sound. Just perfect, clinical destruction. The enemy tried to regroup, but Earth's warships didn't fight like theirs. They didn't trade volleys. They didn't posture. They moved, like blades in water, like ghosts through a storm. Within minutes, a third of the enemy fleet had been destroyed, or disabled. The rest began to scatter, retreat, but Earth didn't pursue. They hadn't come for war. They had come for Kestrel, and in the shelter below, survivors watched as their monitors blinked to life, first with noise, then with signal. A camera feed showed the sky above the colony clearing. No enemy ships, just one enormous Earth vessel hovering in silence, its massive frame casting a shadow across the landscape. A panel on the shelter wall lit up. No codes, no interface, just a message. Plain, old human standard. You are not alone. Marshal Rowan's final words had reached someone, and someone had come. Not to claim the colony, not to raise a flag, but to answer a call that should have never gone unanswered in the first place. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the warships turned, engines flared. One by one, they slipped back into folded space, vanishing into the black without fanfare or farewell. No speeches, no banners. Just a sky, clear again for the first time in weeks. The people of Kestrel stepped outside, and for the first time since they thought they had been abandoned, they looked up and they knew. Someone had been listening. The colony was safe. No invaders remained. No orbiting guns, no siege from above. Just silence. But this silence was different. Not the fearful kind. Not the kind that came before an attack. This was the kind that follows rescue. The kind that felt full. The people of Kestrel emerged slowly, blinking in daylight. Some didn't believe it. Others wept. The children, who had grown used to the walls of the shelter, stood in awe beneath a sky that no longer burned, and high above, Earth's warships were gone. Just like that. They didn't stay to be thanked, didn't land, didn't demand loyalty or recognition. No troops came down, no flags were planted in the dirt, no voice boomed from the heavens declaring victory. They simply left. Left behind a clear sky and a single message embedded in the colony's relay tower. We heard you. No signature, no emblem, but everyone knew who it came from. Some of the elders in the colony had lived long enough to remember Earth, not as a threat, not as a war machine, but as something real, messy, proud, determined, a species that had always been too loud, too quick to fight, but never without reason. Those same elders now whispered what no one else dared to say. They came anyway. The meaning sat heavy in the air, because the truth was, Earth had every reason not to come. They had been betrayed, forgotten, left behind by the very systems they once helped defend. When Earth called for help long ago, the stars turned away. No one came. So why now? Why this colony? Why save a world no one else had bothered to answer? Maybe it was a final act of defiance. Maybe a promise kept. Or maybe Earth had remembered what it felt like to be ignored and decided no one else would feel that way. Not if they could stop it. They hadn't come to make alliances. They hadn't come for revenge. They had come because someone asked for help, and they refused to let silence be the last reply. For the Council, it created a storm. News of the ghost. Fleet spread like wildfire. Footage of the warships dropping from hyperspace played on every screen. Commentators speculated. Politicians panicked. Military strategists whispered about forgotten weapons and unseen powers, and none of it mattered. Because Earth didn't respond to messages. They didn't issue demands. They left no trail to follow. Only memories, a broken enemy fleet, a rescued colony, a quiet phrase etched into the systems of a world nearly erased. You were not forgotten. In back rooms across the galaxy, people started digging. Old files, ancient maps, logs from before Earth's disappearance. Some found whispers of the Leviathan program, the Ghost Fleet Initiative, final fallback systems that had never been officially acknowledged. Others found names. Ships once thought dismantled, commanders, who had vanished from history, and slowly a different kind of fear took root, not of war, but of accountability. Because if Earth was still out there, if they could move without being seen, if they answered a cry for help that the rest of the galaxy ignored, what else had they heard? What else had they recorded? What else might they remember? On Kestrel, though, there were no questions, just gratitude, and something deeper, a feeling the galaxy hadn't known in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, somewhere, out in the black, there was still someone listening, someone who hadn't turned their back, someone who remembered what it meant to care. And if they ever called again, maybe Earth would come once more, not because they owed it, but because they chose to. The footage spread like fire. It started on Kestrel. One local engineer had managed to keep a backup relay running through the siege. As soon as the colony was safe, she uploaded what she had. The sky opening, the ships appearing, the silence as the enemy fell. The final message. We heard you. Within hours, it had reached a dozen systems. Within days, 100. By the end of the week, the entire galaxy had seen it. Most didn't believe it at first. Some claimed it was doctored. Simulation. A propaganda campaign from an Outer Rim faction. Others insisted the ships were stolen council tech, painted black to cause fear. But the ones who had really seen the footage, who had served long ago, when Earth was still part of the known systems, they didn't question it. They knew. You didn't fake those ships. You didn't fake movement like that. No AI system known to the galaxy moved the way Earth's warships did. Clean. Perfect. Ruthless. No warnings. No waste, just execution. Governments started asking questions, loud ones. Where is Earth? Who controls the Ghost Fleet? Why did they help that colony? No one had answers. The council called an emergency session, but little came of that. Politicians spoke in circles. Generals barked into quiet rooms. Old records were dusted off and reviewed. One name came up over and over. Leviathan Protocol, a classified Terran defense directive, long assumed to be theoretical. A myth buried deep in wartime files. According to scattered fragments, the protocol was meant to activate in the event Earth could no longer defend itself, or anyone else, and worse, it was never designed to turn off. A few surviving Terran historians had warned about this very scenario decades ago. Their voices had been drowned out, too fringe, too unlikely. But now, the Ghost Fleet had returned, not for conquest, not for diplomacy, for something else entirely, something simpler. Witness. They had come to show that Earth still existed, not as a political power, not as a trade hub, but as a presence. A memory that refused to die, and more than that, as a promise. Across frontier colonies, whispers grew louder. If Earth helped Kestrel, maybe they'll help us too. If they're out there watching, maybe we're not alone after all. For systems that had been left behind, neglected by the Council, left to fend off raiders and warlords, this wasn't just hope. It was a shift, a message that someone might still answer the call. And for those in power, it was terrifying, because Earth didn't ask permission. It didn't explain itself. It didn't appear at summits or write declarations. It just came, and when it did, it brought a kind of force no navy could match. Not because of numbers, not because of firepower, but because it carried something no one else in the galaxy seemed to value anymore. Conviction. Earth had vanished. That part hadn't changed. No coordinates, no transmissions, no declarations of return, but the message it left behind spread far and wide. If you call for help, and no one comes, we might. No promises, no politics. Just that, and across the stars people began to listen and to wonder. What had Earth seen, what had they heard, and most of all, where would they go next? The Ghost Fleet didn't linger. After Kestrel was safe, after the skies were cleared and the final signal delivered, the warships left just as they arrived, without fanfare, without farewell. One by one, they disappeared back into folded space. No hyperspace trails, no known destination. Not even a trace on long-range scans. They came, they saved, they vanished. The galaxy had no protocol for this, no language to describe a military force that answered no government, asked for no reward, and left nothing but relief in its wake. The weeks that followed, Council forces sent out probes, carefully, quietly, hoping to find them. None returned. Even deep scans into Sol space, the old Earth system, yielded nothing. No signals, no readings, no confirmation that Earth itself was even still there. But no one doubted anymore. Earth was out there, and so was the Ghost Fleet, not waiting, watching. Across the outer systems, small relay buoys began to appear. No one knew where they came from, no transmissions, no warnings. Just a low, steady pulse. 1 per hour. Not a threat, not a trap, just presence. And with them came the message. Short, simple, unmistakable. If you are abandoned, we will find you. If no one answers, we will hear you. We are not here to lead, we are not here to rule. We are here to remember. The colonies listened. The council took notice, and so did the enemies who thought they could attack in silence. Because now silence was no longer safe. It might bring them, not as conquerors, not as diplomats, but as the last voice in the dark. On Kestrel, life slowly returned to normal. Fields reopened. Children played in streets that had been nearly reduced to ash. A statue was built, modest, quiet, marking the exact spot where the sky had first split open. It was not a statue of a person, not even of a ship. Just a smooth stone, set upright, with an inscription carved in Old Terran standard. We called, they came, that was all. They didn't know when or if the Ghost Fleet would return, but they believed. They believed because they had seen it. Not just the ships, but the choice. The decision to come anyway, to show up when everyone else turned away, to fight for someone who had nothing left to offer. That belief spread to neighboring colonies, to distant systems, to abandoned stations now checking their transmitters more carefully, wondering if a quiet voice in the night might be heard. And though Earth remained silent, its message was louder than any broadcast. We remember. The final line of an old Terran defense code was discovered in a decrypted file weeks later. Just a footnote. Buried in a logbook no one had touched in decades, it read, "We do not seek vengeance, we do not seek tribute. We only ask this, that no cry for help is ever left unanswered again." No one knew who wrote it. No one had to. Because, now somewhere beyond the edge of known space, warships drift in silence. Their hulls worn by time but never weak. Their names unspoken but not forgotten. And when the next cry goes out, when another world sends a final message with no hope of reply, the sky will split again. The stars will bend and Earth will answer. Not because it must, but because it refuses to forget what it feels like to be alone. They will come again. And when they do, the stars will remember.